The Ivory Room was usually ranked low in terms of the social life that it promotes. When one goes to the Ivory Room, it's pretty packed, but that's just because of the long lines for smoothies and falafel pockets. But the persona that typically goes to the Ivory Room is seen as really limited. It's often vegan, vegetarian, and participants used the word rabbits.
Participants felt like the Blue Room is a dining hall that has a strong social presence of students either interacting with other students or doing their schoolwork. Participants felt like the Blue Room serves as a dining hall that has a grab and go option and is a dining hall where students are either busy doing work or in between classes. Participants also feel that students in the Blue Room are generally doing schoolwork and quote unquote have their shit together, which was a quotation drawn from a participant in focus group number 5. Participants also believe the Blue Room serves as a place to go when they plan on staying or laying in the main green and is a pretty central spot on campus.
Participants feel that Andrews Dining Hall has a strong social presence at nighttime regarding the quality of specials that they offer for dinner as well as being open for the nightlife. Most of the people describe Andrews as having the persona that of freshmen that live on the north side of campus, as well as people who like to eat in smaller quantities and have higher quality foods because of the specialties that they offer, as well as it being an a la carte dining hall as opposed to a all-you-can-eat. There's no general consensus about where certain groups sit, but more often than not, athletes and other groups and clubs try to sit at the circular tables in the corners of the dining hall.
From our focus groups, we gathered that there are distinct personas attributed to the VDub. In general, the VDub is seen as a place that facilitates social life, but facilitates it for generally specific groups of people. During our mapping exercises, every participant saw the first part as the athlete side, and the rival side as either non-athlete or freshman. Interestingly, some athlete participants said in a quote, "I have no idea who sits on the other side." Social divides are present in the VDub because athletes go solely because it's close to practice, and others go on special days like CFF or for convenience because of class locations. The VDub doesn't get as packed as the Ratty, but the one time it is really crowded is during Fridays, Chicken Finger Fridays, which is often called CFF or Chai Fi Fry. Students will go there, meet up with a bunch of friends, and get a huge plate of chicken fingers, and that's the time that it's most social.
For Joe's, participants in every single focus group all concluded that Joe's is the dining hall that is for the late night drunk people or the ones that have just been out partying all night. That being said, a small portion do believe that this is a place for the late night studier who lives on the south side of campus since no other dining option is open. The social presence and experience at Joe's is one of the strongest that people do have at Brown. Everyone agrees that they go there with their friends at night after going out or going for a study break. People rarely say that they go to Joe's when they are alone. Participants also generally do not match this dining hall with their personality, but majority of them put it in one of their top dining halls just because of the social atmosphere.
In my opinion, when you think of Brown dining, you think of the Ratty. This was said in countless focus groups that we ran when asking people what their first thought about Brown dining was. And what we've also found out was that the Ratty happened to be considered central to your social experience at Brown because it's one of the first places people remember going as first years. Also, place they found most of their first friendships that still last them up until graduation. Despite its hectic nature and overcrowded space and relatively poor quality food, participants felt like the social scene was something they often really enjoyed and could always see either friends they were familiar with or meet new people whenever they walked into the Ratty. Some participants even considered this the Ratty trap, which was when they would walk inside going just for food but end up staying countless hours later because of the fact that they ran into people, sat down, and ended up having conversations. Participants also felt that the Ratty also had the most variety along with the most flexible hours, allowing for them to get in at any time and be able to get something to eat regardless of the time or how much time they had to spend. People also felt that distinct groups were very present in the Ratty as far as location, with one large tables being dedicated to athletes, the front cave being dedicated to quieter conversations in small groups, and the back cave being reserved for those who wanted to eat alone. Regarding the Ratty, most people feel like it's central. It's mainly the most known dining hall on campus, but also the one that features the widest display of various students on this campus.
The main thing that I learned throughout this entire process was the importance of the moderator and how the moderator affects the whole focus group itself. I learned a lot about focus groups from being a note taker as well as crafting the questions, but I feel like those skills from those two aspects of the focus group all flow into how well you are as a moderator. The moderator is the one who really controls the outcome. If the moderator understands the questions more and is able to paraphrase the questions in order to go with the flow of the conversation, then it will really be able to change the way that the participants feel and how comfortable they are during the conversation. And the focus group that I conducted, I paraphrased a couple questions, and it really seemed to make one of the participants engage me more and even engage the other participants more, giving us a better sense of how he feels about our topic, and he was elaborating more on his questions. Another big thing that I learned about being the moderator is that it has a huge impact on the success of the focus group, just because the moderator needs to keep the conversation relevant and prevent any participants from going off on tangents. This way, the note takers will be able to do their job much better. And if the note takers are able to do their job better, then we have more concrete data and more quotes, which will allow our analysis to be more on point, and eventually the focus group will be more successful since it can help the client, so to speak. What I really learned about myself as the moderator is I'm really good at engaging small groups of people and getting them to open up about a certain topic, but I really am not very good at actually getting them to stay on topic and preventing so much back and forth on random topics during the focus group itself. When I was the moderator, I was having an issue with two participants who were talking about dining halls and then Thayer Street, and then they were just talking about food that they were interested in later on that day. And I was having an issue with them actually distracting from the group and the other participants, and the note takers were having to forget what they were hearing as well, which was very difficult. As a note taker and crafting the questions, I didn't learn nearly as much, but I feel like as a moderator, that really showed me most about being in the focus group, the process of conducting a focus group and how the questions can change throughout the focus group and what it ultimately will lead to.
In creating this focus group, I learned a lot about paying attention to the responses given and the patterns that arise from these responses. In our first few groups, we started to get responses that hinted at the relationship between social presence and dining being more complex than we initially thought it would be. But at this time, of course, it was too late to scrap the entire study. So what we had to do instead was change up our questioning protocol to generate the responses that would, of course, expand on these trends that we saw hinted throughout the first couple of focus groups. So from this, I really learned how difficult it could be to create a perfect questioning protocol because, of course, your participants can show you things that you didn't initially think you would see in these focus groups and responses you might not have thought would be important patterns to focus on. So then after adding our questions, I realized that the flow of the groups themselves became more organic, and then as a moderator, I learned that it was also just easier to follow the questioning format once we then added the proper additional questions that we needed to. But holistically, I learned that creating, moderating, and note-taking for a focus group take an immense amount of people skills, personability, but also attention to detail, as well as the ability to be flexible because, of course, we have to follow the lead of the participants and what they say, and then adapt what our focus group and the questioning protocol is to match that.
The process of designing the focus group is actually really important, as well as the focus group itself. So when I was designing my focus group, I was thinking a lot about how we had chosen participants in the past that knew each other typically, or we as moderators knew the participants. But I wanted to try to come up with a focus group where the participants were all strangers and I particularly didn't know them. So I posted in a lot of the Brown Facebook groups, and I got participants who were complete strangers. Ultimately, when I was posting in these focus groups, I advertised it as kind of a way to get free food, and so I think from that, I got participants who were typically from lower income backgrounds off meal plan and were using this focus group as a means to get their dinner meal. One problem arose though, because when I had ordered pizza, it actually didn't arrive, so I felt throughout the entire focus group I kind of had let down my participants because they came typically, most of them came for a meal. But one thing I also noticed was that these participants were a little bit timid in their participation because they didn't know one another. Granted, having strangers was a good dynamic to try to reach a different participant pool than we had reached in the past, because some of the students had a lot of reasons for going off a meal plan because of financial reasons. That's kind of a sensitive topic, and the participants were a little bit reluctant to talk about that in front of other people. So I could definitely see why dynamics outside of focus groups actually come into play when people are participating with strangers. And that's something that I would definitely reconsider in the future, maybe having a focus group that discusses financial aspects of dining halls in which all of the participants are from low-income backgrounds might actually facilitate more conversation, or if they all knew each other in the past as well. Having interviewed one of the participants in our groups prior to actually having our moderator conduct the focus group, I noticed that the participant changed his responses a little bit to kind of get along with the members of his group. So he had mentioned that he does actually eat off campus really frequently at expensive dining restaurants around Providence, but within the focus group he kind of limited discussion on off-campus dining and didn't mention this to the other participants. So I can definitely see how social group cohesion comes into play in focus groups as well.
Through this focus group process, I learned a lot. I was kind of my group's first moderator. I feel like I learned a lot as moderator. I also learned a lot about the phrasing of our focus group question protocol and how important that is, and how important it is as a moderator to really know that question protocol, and have the phrasing down pat, as well as have follow-up questions and being able to read the group. But I found more of an important or significant side of being a note taker, just from a perspective viewing, because as a note taker of the second focus group we conducted, I got to see how a moderator could influence participants' responses. During our mapping exercise, the moderator had clarified a question one of the participants had with regards to answering the mapping question, and the moderator used an example of the word good, in which that participant later wrote down the word good and explained that they used the word good for one of the responses because the moderator had said it as an example and it made sense to them. Just seeing that, how an outside variable like that can influence a respondent's perception or feelings during a focus group was interesting to me, as well as seeing the difference between participants that don't know each other and all participants that know each other. I was the only note taker for focus group number 4 that we conducted, and it was just interesting to see that all the participants in focus group 4 all knew each other and how they all fed off of each other, and that's really where our focus group got the climax perception that Brown's dining options or affect one's social experiences once they get into Brown, because they don't really know anyone. But once they develop those social experiences, it is really their ultimate social presence that determines their dining options at Brown, which I found really interesting and intriguing.
Over the course of the past semester, I learned a great deal about the process of conducting focus groups. Specifically, I learned that it's pretty easy to reach points of saturation within focus group discussions. Therefore, it is vital to the success of the research that the moderator properly navigate the conversation to reflect points of interest as well as new thoughts or ideas. In terms of our specific research, I did not realize how great of a role social networks actually have in determining dining choices here at Brown. I thoroughly enjoyed working with our team and had a great time this semester.